Hello everybody. Of all the time that I've been a photographer, I've never been more sure that I won't get a portfolio photo than I am today. I'd bet the house on it. Now, I imagine some of you are probably thinking that's a very pessimistic approach to have at the start of a morning's photography, and you're absolutely right. The reason I feel pessimistic is because I'm going to use one of these, a 10-stop filter. Probably not a big deal to most of you. I'm sure lots of you use these kinds of things. I hardly ever use these. I've had this in my bag about 2 or 3 years. I'd have got more use out of the fishnet parachute. Could maybe use it as a coaster, although it's a 58mm filter thread, so probably have to be an espresso coaster. Now, I've spoken at length before on this channel about why I don't really like using filters, and it's much the same reason that I don't like things like filters in Instagram. An entirely different kind of filter, I know. But in many cases, they make photos look very different to how they would have looked in real life. And to me, a lot of the time that constitutes over-editing. And I appreciate the irony in that when it comes from somebody who got their working start as a photographer in compositing. But yeah, typically things like blurring water, I'm just not the biggest fan of. It doesn't do anything for me when I look at those photos as a viewer. However, I don't think in this world there has ever been a better time to question your own biases in all things in life, including photography. And so what I thought I'd do today is come and try some long exposure photography to see if I still don't like it. Because like I say, it's a good time to question what you do and don't like, and maybe practice what you don't like to check that you don't like it. So that's what I'm doing today. A bit scary because I've got no idea really how to use one of these. Right, first things first, I've got to wander around and try and find a decent composition. This, speaking of composite, is going to have to be a composite photo on the basis that, as you can probably tell, it's quite windy. So the trees are moving around a bit, and if I want a long exposure, I certainly don't want blurry leaves. I just want the water to be blurry. So I'm going to have to get a very quick shot to still the motion of the leaves, and then get a longer shot of the water, blend them together. The other reason that I don't like long exposures, obviously, as you'll know if you've watched this channel for a while, is that I have to use a tripod, as you can probably see down there. And I have to bring one to film on. So someone that hates tripods has to carry 2 tripods to make one video and one photo. Not my cup of tea, typically. Right then, I think I've found a half-decent composition. Talking like I'm a landscape photographer, aren't I? No. Basically, I just want this tree trunk and a few branches to frame the waterfall. I'm not interested in having the whole tree in the photo. I'll show you a photo of what I'm going for. I'm at f5.6, which at full frame depth of field equivalent is about f11. Focusing on the tree trunk, and I'm getting a shutter speed of 200th of a second, which should be more than enough to still the leaves that are moving around in the wind. It's actually a bit less windy than it was, so I'll just make sure that they are still at 200th of a second, and then I'll go from there. Now, with this kind of scene and this kind of composition, I'd make life very difficult for myself, given that I want to blend 2 frames together, the tree and then the water separately, because I need to still the leaves of the tree. I'd make life very difficult for myself if I didn't create a degree of separation between the tree and the water. And that's because in a long exposure shot, if I have got leaves moving around in exactly the same place that I want to mask out to have the blurred water, then I'm going to have blurred leaves in that bit of the image as well. So I've selected the camera's height based on the fact that there are no leaves blocking the water. And that means that I should be able to mask in Photoshop and get a very clean blend of images. And in theory, at least, I'll basically just be able to paint over the water to get a nice smoothed out water effect. But as you'll know, if you've got much experience as a photographer, in theory, it doesn't necessarily translate to the finished product. I've just noticed that the sun is about 90 degrees from where I'm shooting. So it's sort of across the scene that I'm shooting, which means a polarizer should come into play. You can probably tell that I don't know what I'm doing with this sort of photography, can't you? I only just realised that. Not polarised, polarised. Not polarised, polarised. I mean, it always makes the most difference on water, this kind of thing. It gets rid of the glare, but when the sun's in the right position, it can also affect the greens and the blues as well. Okay, the polarizer's taken my shutter speed down a couple of stops, so we're now at a 60th of a second, which I'm not sure is fast enough to get the leaves completely still. So that's the next thing we're going to check. hard work, this kind of photography. Yeah, leaves are still, we're in business. I might also just get a high resolution photo as well while I'm here. So in the G9, I can get an 80 megapixel file just by taking a few different photos. The camera does it automatically, but the sensor will shift about half a pixel between a number of different photos, and it'll stitch them all together. And up until recently, this was quite limited. You couldn't have anything moving in the frame, because obviously if the pixel's moving over a period of time, if there's any movement in that time, then the camera's going to pick it up. Now though, there's a second mode that's been added in firmware, and it means that scenes like this, actually you can get away with it, and it's really, really impressive. So let me try and take an 80 megapixel file. Right then, I got plenty of the fast shot for the leaves in the tree, including some 80 megapixel ones, which turned out great actually, so that's pretty good. Time to put the 10 stop on. Pretty much the cheapest 10 stop on the market, I think, made by a company called Gobe, an Australian company, who plant trees every time you get filters, so that's pretty good. And considering I don't use them hardly ever, there's no point me spending loads of money on getting really good ones. Not to say this isn't good, I wouldn't know, but I guess we'll find out. Also, I put that on too early. I've not checked my exposure. I need to check my exposure so that I can work out what it needs to be with this on. Okay, shutter speed before the 10 stop is 160th of a second. So I'll use photo pills to work out what my exposure needs to be. 10 stop, 6 seconds, apparently. We'll see how that comes out. It's funny, on the one hand, this is really not my style of photography, and so I don't really care if it works or not, because chances are I probably won't like the result anyway. On the other hand, I feel quite nervous. I sort of hope it does work. And also it goes without saying that most YouTube videos, I think, come from a place of authority. I mean, when I'm talking about photography most of the time, it's because I think I have a good perspective on the thing that I'm talking about. Not the case with this one. I'll tell you what I do really love about waterfalls, even if I don't like photographing them that much, is the sense of peace you feel when you leave them and your ears aren't being bombarded by the noise anymore. So I don't realise how loud they are until you step away from them. Oh, lovely. I can hear myself think again, which isn't always good. Right then, same again down here, I think. The name of the game remains the same. I'm going to try and get some nice flowing water, and then I'll still the tree with a separate exposure. I think I might go landscape this time to get some of these ferns in. I like these ferns as well. Probably from about where you are right now. I'll have a play. All right, let me very quickly walk you through this second composition. So, what I really like about this, mainly, is that you get to see the hill line right at the top of the image, and it's separated from these branches here. I like that, as opposed to trying to get the whole tree in and just losing that. To me, the hill line makes all the difference. I also like, and you can't really see it here in this 16:9 crop because I'm filming at the moment, but in 4:3, you get a really nice area of detail here, and together with this clump of rocks in the middle, I think that looks good. I've also got a big area of ferns over here because I like the ferns. The polarizer is fully on, and I think the leaning tree, together with the cascade over there, looks pretty nice too. It's quite a simple composition. It's not going to win any awards, but I think it looks quite nice. And again, I've managed to separate the tree and the water so that the blending of the photo should be relatively straightforward. Right then, quick update on how I'm going. I tried the 10 stop for this water, but it's really not running fast enough. It's not dramatic enough, and you just get a real milky effect, particularly in these white spots, as I'm sure many of you will know. And I just really don't like that. I don't like how that looks. So I tried the ND64 that I've got, although it's got a massive scratch on it. I don't know if you can see that scratch. It's been sat in my little filter pack, probably at the bottom of my bag for years, and as a consequence, massive scratch. I couldn't actually see it in the photo I took, but it was still too much of the water blurring effect. So I've currently got an ND8, and we're getting shutter speeds of about 1/4 of a second, and that is turning out to be something that I quite like the look of, relative to certainly the 10 stop. So Gonna stick with that, I think, get a couple more shots, and then go home and try and process them and see what it looks like. Who knows if I'll like it or not. I mean, you might disagree, but I don't think they're too bad. I mean, I'm not going to be teaching any classes in long exposures anytime soon, but they might make it in next year's book. Speaking of classes, I'm very pleased to say that this week's video was sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an incredible online community full of thousands of classes and thousands of students learning anything from photography, videography, UX design, productivity, music, illustration, crafts. There's loads of stuff on there, all for less than $10 a month. And if you fancy trying it out, if you're one of the first 1,000 subscribers to click the link in my description, you can get Skillshare for 2 months free. And I'm currently going through Matty Brown's classes on filmmaking, because I know I make these videos, but I just kind of throw them together. I mean, I only learnt what transition was about a month ago. So hopefully I'll be able to make these a little bit more cinematic with the tips that I learn on Skillshare. Like I say, if you want to check it out, then hit the link in the description, and I hope you like it as much as I do. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I was going to say that in the next video I won't be doing long exposures, but who knows? Maybe I will after my mediocre results.